Hello and welcome to Build Better, a virtual summit to challenge your thinking and inspire you to take action towards building transformational and inclusive economic growth. My name is Warren Ruiz. My pronouns are he, him, and his, or you can just call me Warren. And I'm board chair of San Diego Grantmakers and director of regional public affairs for San Diego Gas and Electric, your local utility if you're in San Diego. Sempra Energy, the parent company to SDG&E, and a member of both San Diego Grantmakers and the San Diego Regional EDC, is proud to be the headliner sponsor for today's Build Better Summit. I'm so proud of their sponsorship and excited that they're headlining today's event. Our aim is to enrich lives, build a more inclusive economy, and advance social progress today. And conversations like the one we are going to have today at this virtual summit is a great step in that direction. This year, San Diego Grantmakers is joining forces with the San Diego Regional EDC to convene leaders in both business and philanthropy who are committed to building an equitable economy and resourcing the transition from our current systems, policies, and approaches. 2020 has presented all of us many challenges. The public health crisis and its economic impacts on the most vulnerable communities, wildfires and climate resiliency concerns throughout the state, and a nationwide reckoning of injustice toward Black lives have impacted our neighbors, friends, loved ones, and our employees. We've learned a lot. And what if the lessons we learned from this year could be leveraged to not only build back, but build better towards the shared prosperity our businesses and our philanthropists desire? That's why you're here. Before we start today's summit, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Kumeyaay people. I respectfully acknowledge this legacy from the Kumeyaay, and I'm pleased to note that we'll hear from one of our partners working with the region's tribes to access federal and philanthropic resources as part of our program today. Now, to open with reflections on today's theme and the partnership between San Diego Grantmakers and the San Diego Regional EDC, I'm very pleased to introduce Megan Thomas, Vice President of Collaboration and Special Initiatives here at San Diego Grantmakers. Megan?
Hi, everyone. It is so good to be with you here today, heading towards 200 community members, funders, government representatives, business and nonprofit leaders registered to spend some time talking about an equitable economy. As Warren said, I'm Megan Thomas, Vice President of Collaboration and Special Initiatives here at San Diego Grantmakers. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am a 40-year-old white woman with long brown hair, seated in front of bookshelves and wearing a blue top. Although I am speaking, I represent the entire incredible team at San Diego Grantmakers. And let me start by thanking those who supported today's event with sponsorship. Our headline sponsor, Sempra Energy, is joined by our premier sponsor, Bodman PLC, and the San Diego Business Journal, who's our media partner for this event. Many others have supported us, including the California Wellness Foundation, Qualcomm Incorporated, and Kaiser Permanente. As much as anything, it's your support that means everything to us in this event. And this platform, Visibo, is designed to help you participate. At the bottom right of your screen, there, you'll see a chat box. And please feel free to use it. We'll be monitoring any questions or comments you have and bringing them into the discussions today. And in the notes at the top of the screen, you'll see social media handles that you can use if you're live online and want to comment via social. If you are interested in using closed captioning, you can click on the link under the session title above, or if you don't see it, go back to the agenda page and click closed captioning there. Tomorrow, you'll receive a link with a recording of all of today's great conversations, and it'll include a brief 4-question survey that we hope you'll fill out so that we can improve our programming in the future. So why are we here? This past year has tested us and sharpened our awareness. A zip code can predict exposure to COVID-19. Defense of property was cast as more important than defense of life. And children's access to education while never equal, clearly has been shown to depend on income and infrastructure. Thanks to the USD Nonprofit Institute, we know that while demand for services has increased, over 60% of nonprofits lost revenue this year, and more than half of them had to cut their workforce. Tens of thousands of small businesses applied for loans and grants to be able to survive, and research from the EDC shows that people are leaving the workforce at record numbers. Today, we have the opportunity to take a deep, grounding breath. It's a practice that we have here at Grantmakers to help us focus and be present in the moment. So we can take this breath and reimagine ourselves. Although the pain of the moment is still very real, possibility is abundant. Think about what we accomplished this year. Funders moved unrestricted dollars rapidly and with little more than an email to back it up. Reporting requirements were eliminated. Businesses reorganized so that their employees could be safe, could balance childcare and work, and could acknowledge that they're not always okay. Mutual aid groups like We All We Got San Diego and the Black Women Deserve made sure that everyone in our community has somewhere to turn. And artists like you'll see today helped us understand and express what we are all experiencing. We have the opportunity to see where we are broken, to acknowledge a history of slavery and genocide, that climate change is real and hits low-income folks the hardest. And from that, we can build strength and conviction. We can take uncertainty and turn it into innovation. San Diego Grantmakers envisions an impactful, collaborative, equitable social change ecosystem that benefits all in our region. An ecosystem, by definition, is interdependent. If one element is unwell, the entire system degrades. If my neighbor is not well, then I am not well. Now is the time to build better. And together, across San Diego and Imperial counties, we are ready. So what comes next? If you close your eyes, what do you feel? What have you felt called to declare this year? We can remember and embody those feelings. We can say now that we support equity and opportunity, that Black lives matter. And when we begin to have more choices, when the world for some goes back to a little more normal, we can continue to say that equity matters. We can say it again in 2 years and in 10 years. And we can make decisions based on that commitment. And we can know that this will grow the pie, not just change who gets a slice. Today at the Build Better Summit, you'll be immersed in conversations about an equitable, democratic economy. We've got all the right people in this virtual room. There's you, there's our incredible speakers, and there's our partners in this event, the San Diego Regional Economic Development Corporation, whose commitment to inclusive economic growth seeks to ensure that when our economy rebounds, it works for all, not just some. So I'm pleased to introduce our next speaker. He's a dad, a sports fan. He loves this town, and he's a true leader and partner. Mark Cafferty, CEO of the San Diego Regional Economic Development Corporation.
Good morning to everyone who is attending today's summit. My name is Mark Cafferty. For those of you who I don't know, I'm the president and CEO of the San Diego Regional EDC, and we are proud partners of this summit, and we're proud partners with Grantmakers year-round in really trying to address the needs and the challenges that San Diego continues to face. And right now, those needs and challenges have never been greater. I'm actually coming to you here today from my wife's family's home on the North Shore of Oahu in Hawaii, and I'm here for very strange reasons, and maybe someday when I'm back in San Diego and we can see each other live again, I'll explain to you why I'm here. Good morning to everyone who is attending today's summit. My name is Mark Cafferty. For those of you who I don't know, I'm the president and CEO of the San Diego Regional EDC, And we are proud partners of this summit, and we're proud partners with Grantmakers year-round in really trying to address the needs and the challenges that San Diego continues to face. And right now, those needs and challenges have never been greater. I'm actually coming to you here today from my wife's family's home on the North Shore of Oahu in Hawaii. And I'm here for very strange reasons, and maybe someday when I'm back in San Diego and we can see each other live again, I'll explain to you why I'm here. But I really wish I was there with you today to be addressing and dealing with these issues that you'll be focusing on through the day, because there's never been a time where the partnership between the private sector and the public sector and philanthropy has been more important than it is right now in addressing not only our economy's needs, but our community's needs. This pandemic has hit all of us very hard personally, but it has hit certain segments of our community and certain segments of our economy much, much harder. So while we are all in the same boat, in a lot of ways, we are all in different boats. And we're hoping that the ideas and the conversations that come out of today's summit will be the ones that help lead us to the right solutions and the right strategies in the year and in the years ahead to make sure that not only our economy thrives, but our community and all corners of our community thrive. So I thank you all for being there today. Again, wish I could join you and look forward to the continued dialogue that comes from today's sessions.
We so appreciate Mark beaming in from Oahu. There's been nothing about 2020 that's predictable, and that was just one of those things. But Mark's right. This is a moment for all of us to come together, and in a few moments, we'll hear from incredible speakers who are doing the daily work in communities, organizing, contributing funds and time, showing up again and again. And as we interact with our speakers, I would invite you to make this a personal journey. I know what I'll be doing is thinking about, what can I change? What can San Diego Grantmakers help in our community to change, so that when we come out the other side, we have a society that we want to live in. We have a place where opportunity really is available to all. So we can ask ourselves hard questions. We can ask our speakers hard questions to imagine, how can we use the power that we have to lift others? As San Diego Grantmakers has grown over the 40 years of its history, we've evolved from a lunch bunch of folks talking about the ins and outs of philanthropy, comparing notes on a monthly basis, to a broad group of funders, an action-driven network of social investors of all types. This is a proactive, diverse group who are committed to resourcing a region where we recognize inequities and ensure that everyone, especially those who are historically and currently marginalized, have the opportunity to thrive. That's why I'm about to share the worst kept secret in town, which is that in December, our name will change. We will become Catalyst of San Diego and Imperial counties. That's right, we've grown to embrace the entirety of our community. We've grown to extend to Imperial County. And in just a few moments, Dr. Kyra Greene will kick off our conversation today. But first, I'm pleased to share a very short video that says a bit more about this milestone in our history.
The SDG community has been really valuable to me since the first day I started working in this sector. In the beginning, Grantmakers truly was a professional development organization for me. And then over time, it became a place I really enjoy being. I started to make relationships with other Grantmaker members and other peer organizations in the community, and found that as much as I was learning specific and tactical skills that I could contribute into my work, it also was just a group of people I wanted to spend time with, and a community that I saw myself in.
I think San Diego Grantmakers is a microcosm of San Diego. It is really what San Diegans are all about. So many people in San Diego give in some way, and one of the things that I value most about San Diego Grantmakers is that it provides a space for us all to gather together and to work together in very intentional and deliberate ways.
One amazing thing about San Diego Grantmakers and the San Diego community is that each one of us practitioners all have specific backgrounds. We may come from nonprofit, we may come from corporate, and all of these different perspectives are really invaluable when you're attacking a problem.
One of the things that I love about being a part of Grantmakers is that representing the LGBT community, we are one of the most underfunded communities in the entire world with regards to philanthropic work. And so we get to be a voice to advocate for this community within the broader Grantmakers community.
The issues that we face here in San Diego County and in the nation for that matter are much larger than any one organization or any one community can really take care of. And so here at San Diego Grantmakers, it goes beyond philanthropy.
The heart of our community is our collaboration. Taking a regional approach to some of the needs has been something that has been beneficial to our stakeholders out here. In 2020, the Grantmakers community was the lifeblood of us getting through this pandemic.
We're in a space right now where being a part of a social impact community is critically important for the future of our communities.
2020 has been an incredible year for collaboration, and really a year that I think through resources like San Diego Grantmakers, we couldn't have done this alone. There's no way that one company, one foundation, one group could take on COVID alone. So it's incredible to have such an incredible county of practitioners and community of practice around San Diego helping us achieve that next goal.
No one person, no one institution can meet the needs that we all have and all see, so we all must work together.
It's the forum and the place where we can connect with each other, and it's also that extra spark that makes those connections impactful and not just connection for connection's sake. In many ways, I think it better describes what you've always done and then what this community has always been.
Catalyst is all about who you stand for and about your commitment to serving communities in all communities. When I think about Catalyst, it's not about raising the playing field, but it's about creating an opportunity for all, not for just some.
As a board member, I've seen the evolution of this organization. I'm excited for the new era of Catalyst.
We are Catalyst.
We are Catalyst.
We are catalysts.
And we're funding a thriving region.
And we are funding a thriving region.
And we're funding a thriving region together.
I want to welcome you to Build Better's opening session, where we'll discuss the foundational elements of an inclusive, equitable economy and the building blocks it takes to achieve it. My name is Dr. Kyra Greene, and I am a middle-aged African-American woman wearing curly natural hair, pink headphones, a blazer, and a black shirt. I am so happy to be here, and because alongside Warren and Ian and Kim, who you saw in the videos, I am a member of the San Diego Grantmakers Board of Directors. I'm also the executive director at the Center on Policy Initiatives, which was founded in 1997. It's a nonprofit dedicated to achieving prosperity, a sustainable environment, and a voice in democracy for working families in the San Diego region. It's not surprising then that I'm excited to be joined by my colleagues from the Democracy Collaborative, the president and co-founder Ted Howard, and vice president for racial equity, and the Democratic Economy, Ronnie Galvin. Hi. So before we jump into our discussion this morning about policies and systems and resources that San Diego and Imperial counties need to make progress towards an equitable economy, I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves. If it's okay, Ted, would you start us off with an intro?
Thank you very much, Kyra. My name is, as Kyra said, Ted Howard. I'm the co-founder and president of the Democracy Collaborative. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm a 6'5" tall, older white American, but my 91-year-old mom still considers me her baby. And I'm coming to you from Denver, Colorado.
And Ronnie, could you give us a quick intro as well? Sorry, you may be frozen. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties. While we're waiting for, did I hear you? Oh, so sorry. While Ronnie's getting back with us, Ted, maybe I could ask you to begin our discussion by telling me what motivated you to co-found the Democracy Collaborative, and what are the possibilities you see in this movement to create a better economy?
Thanks, Kyra. Well, first, let me say before responding to Kyra's very good question, it's great to be with you all. While I live in Denver, Colorado now, and have lived for many years in Cleveland, Ohio, and back east in Washington, D.C., I still consider myself Californian. I grew up in West Los Angeles. I lived for a period down your way in OB and Ocean Beach. I went to college at the University of California, Santa Cruz, so I'm a banana slug, as they call them. And my kids, who are all grown up, obviously, live in the San Francisco Bay Area. So I have a lot of connections to your region. I was motivated with partners 20 years ago to found the Democracy Collaborative because we were deeply concerned about the possibility for democracy in the United States. And, you know, a lot of us think that it's just, you know, you go to the polls every 2 or 4 years and you vote, and that's what democracy is all about. But in fact, we really believe that the democratic promise of our country is deeply rooted in our communities. And, you know, over 200 years ago, the founders of this country extended the principles of democracy into the political process. Now, obviously, it's imperfect. We're always trying to improve it. There are flaws in our Constitution, but there is a sense of democratic and civic participation is what would make a democracy flourish. But the founders did not extend the principles of democracy into the economy. And that, I think, has become increasingly a problem. Our political democracy is being held captive in many ways by large economic interests that are ever more consolidated. And so we founded the Democracy Collaborative to really look at, you know, how do we revitalize democracy and participation at the community level. And we very quickly concluded that we simply cannot ignore the economic context in which we are living. While this country's economy is highly productive, and indeed works for a good number of people, the reality is that more than 40% of Americans say they cannot put together $400 in cash to meet an emergency. This in the wealthiest productive economy of the world, $400. And that's before the COVID pandemic wrecked our economy. So it's even much worse now. We're facing really serious problems. Hundreds of thousands of small, medium-sized businesses are disappearing before our eyes. There are some estimates that of the some 20 million people originally thrown into unemployment as a result of the pandemic, 42% of them may have lost their jobs and may never have jobs to return to. So the question becomes, and this is relevant for the theme here of building better, you know, how do we rebuild this economy? And so to just conclude and let Ronnie follow in, at the Democracy Collaborative, we consider ourselves a laboratory for what we call the democratic economy. And where that democratic economy begins, we believe, is through community wealth building, a process of developing local assets and institutions in communities like San Diego and in your region that ensure that wealth stays local, that it's broadly shared, and recognizes that building wealth among our individuals and families and communities is the key, not just income. You know, a job and a good income can get you out of poverty, but staying out of poverty requires that we each have a certain level of wealth. Now, I'm not talking about the billionaire wealth, but the kind of wealth that provides stability for our communities and our families and our neighborhoods. There are many proven strategies that are already being implemented around the country that are wealth building in nature, and I think we'll be talking about them at this summit. Employee ownership, social enterprise, cooperatives, public banks, land trusts, impact investing, anchor institution procurement that's localized. But the final thing I'd say, Kyra, is that when we founded the Democracy Collaborative, the idea of community wealth building was quite a new idea and very foreign, and probably is still something that's very new to many in this conference. But I can tell you that community wealth building is becoming a national and even an international movement. Last year, I was a co-author of a book called Making of a Democratic Economy, Building Prosperity for the Many, Not Just the Few. And we can see right now inspiring stories of community wealth building being implemented. New York City and Chicago and the mayor's office are systematically implementing municipal policies for community wealth building. Some of you may have heard of the Evergreen Cooperatives in Cleveland, Ohio, that are employing hundreds of people, many of them returning citizens, people who've been left behind in the economy, who now have family supporting jobs, profit sharing, ownership of their companies. And in the United Kingdom, the same thing is happening. So the idea that there is another way beyond the kind of, carbon-based, large corporate capitalism that we're familiar with, that used to be a radical notion. But now there's a groundswell for the building of a new and more democratic economy. With that, I'll stop and perhaps turn it over to you, Kyra, or to Ronnie directly.
Yeah, how about Ronnie? How about you jump in and give us an intro?
Yeah, thanks, Ted and Dr. Greene. Really good to be with you on the panel. So yes, my name is Ronnie Galvin, also Kwabla Mawololo, Kwabla Tuesday born in Ghana. Mawololo, God is great. And I'm the vice president, as Dr. Greene has introduced me, of racial equity and the democratic economy at the Democracy Collaborative. And I just want to follow a little in Ted's wake there. So he talks about how the principles of democracy really aren't embedded in our economy. I think if also, and Ted, I don't think Ted would argue with me on this, we could also say that there's a question about whether or not the principles of democracy are actually in our democracy, right? And so, and that really is hanging perilously in the balance these days. And for Black people, Indigenous people, and other people of color, I can emphatically say it really has never been a democracy for us. And so we really are, Ted and I, excited and thrilled that your region is talking about this issue of the equitable economy. And just a few thoughts real quick, Dr. Greene, about what it would take to get there. First, it would take a fundamental redesign, as Ted is suggesting, of the infrastructure of our economy, the one that has brought us to this point and the one that's created the mess that we're in. But to do so, right, and Ted has already started talking about some of the kind of economic and technical mechanisms, and all of those are important. But as Ted has said, and I want to echo, at the root of that is community, right? At the root of that are the values that we hold, right? And so when we think about what an equitable economy might look like, the first thing we got to do is look at our values, right? And Megan began to telegraph this in her opening comments, right? How do we move from a system that's built on the values of Darwinism, right? Survival of the fittest, every man, and I meant that intentionally, every man for himself, right? To a value of communalism. Now, I did not say communism. I did not say socialism, right? I said communalism, right? And collective well-being. In other words, and I'm going to say it like we say it where I'm from, ain't none of us doing well until all of us are doing well, right? And the converse is also true. If one of us or some of us are doing bad, then all of us are doing bad, right? So we got to begin at the place of values. Secondly, we've been exploring at the Democracy Collaborative a lane that really has begun to get traction in the country, but that many, many, many folks have been fighting in for decades. And that is, how do we bring the concept of repair or reparations? Can I say that in this conference? Can I say that in this conference? How do we bring that into the economic system, right? Right? And we have to consider this because of the harm that this system and its primary purveyors that has been exacted on communities of color, particularly Black and Indigenous people, right? And so any economy that claims to be equitable, that claims to be on a path toward equity, must also be intrinsically and reflexively reparative. By this, I mean that we must design an economic system that has the idea of reparations as the primary component of its operating structure, right? And we're just now starting to get our thinking together around this, right? Ted talked about the notion of a democratic economy. We're also now talking about the notion of a reparative economy. And let me just give you one example. Can I just give one example, right? So when you add up the cumulative negative impact of the traumatic legacies of racial violence, extraction, exclusion, denial, discrimination in every sector of life that just Black folks, for example, have endured in this country, it's not hard to understand why we have the racial wealth gap and why it's so big, right? So big that it would take the average Black family 228 years to amass the wealth of a white family if average white families stopped amassing wealth today, right? That's a huge gap, 228 years to catch up, right? One scholar, and I'm still looking for the site, Dr. Greene, right? One scholar said that that gap, to close it, because so much has been stolen, is about $97 trillion. $97 trillion, if you add up the cumulative effect, generational trauma, right? And so in a reparative system, the stolen, the extracted wealth, right, that created the gap that we're all talking about now, the racial wealth gap, we would simply give it back. And if we would actually just return back the things that have been stolen, we could actually start to close things like the racial wealth gap. And we can do it in education, and we can do it in health. We can do it in every sector of life, right? And so, so we think that this idea of reparations has to be at the center of our economic design, right? How we behave, how we bias toward where the pain is happening, and how we actually repair. And then I'll be done. And then design the system in a way so that it never happens again, which means that we have to interrogate this current system in a way so that the harm it's done, it never does again. So that's what we're up to, and excited again to be in this conversation with y'all.
So just a few little tiny nuggets there from you two. Nothing exciting at all so far. Let's see if we can spice it up a little bit. No, I think these are, amazing points. One of the things that it strikes me about this idea is that, I often talk about the work that we do. If someone asks me, how do you know the health of your economy? I say, we often tell the story right now by looking at the people at the top. And say, how well is it working for them? That's every time you turn on the news, every economic report we get generally focuses on that. But if we had a truly, an economy that really worked for people, you'd be able to go to the people we typically leave out of that story. And if they were doing well, if we made systems that worked for them, you don't even have to worry about the people at the top.
Right.
When you build a system that works for the most marginalized, it will meet the needs of other folks. Some of that lesson for me comes out of training in the disability rights movement and seeing how just making changes to physical structures to make them more accessible actually serve the needs of a broader set of folks than if you start by assuming the exclusion of people with disabilities and building systems that way. Yeah. But I feel like what I think a lot of people might be thinking at this point is okay, those are some pretty big ideas, about where we want to go. And the problem is big, as you described it, Ronnie. So I'm going to turn just for a second. I'm going to ask you to do this first, Ted. What are some of the, what are the steps? What does it look like to build better? What are the components of it?
Mm-hmm. Who would you like to go first?
I don't know. You're both so exciting. I cannot decide.
Go ahead.
Well, let me say a couple things. So one is maybe 3 points. So, and it's a good question. There needs to be an intentionality of what kind of result do we want to produce. The reality is the way we run the economy and economic development now and job creation, all that is, while we've kind of discredited the term trickle down, if we just get all this activity going, it will surely hit the street where people are most in need. We've kind of discredited the term, but the reality is that's still how the economy is organized. And, I lived, when I lived in Cleveland, on the east side of Cleveland, I lived in a neighborhood where the median household income for my neighbors, not for me, but for my neighbors, was $18,500 for a household. That's over $4,000 below the federal poverty line. And yet the regional economy kept growing, but it did not hit the street. So the first is intentionality. We have got to be clear. Who do we want to benefit? What are the strategies? And stop the magical thinking that some kind of market free hand is going to work here. Second thing is, I believe, at least, that the whole system of economic development, as it's practiced in cities and by states, the tens and tens and tens of billions of dollars, probably more than that, hundreds of billions flowing through that system, it's largely a waste of money. Now, I know I kind of sound like a conservative, right? This government stuff, but it's not doing the job. So we need to supplant that. Imagine if the city of San Diego intentionally embarked on a new economic development strategy that instead of providing subsidies to companies and moving jobs in and out of the area and all that, it actually was focused on fostering employee ownership, building up the cooperative solidarity economy, all that, creating jobs that are family supporting where people have a share of equity and stake in the matter. So I think that's the second is economic development. We've got to take that on. Third thing, I know there are a lot of business owners in the, as I understand it, in the conversation here. Business owners, especially small and medium, need succession plans. Eventually they're going to, retire, whatever. There's a whole movement in America to take existing small and medium-sized businesses and as an exit strategy for owners to turn those companies into employee-owned companies. It's a benefit to the owner through the tax system and all that, but it really benefits the employees and helps them build their wealth and equity. There are whole organizations that do that kind of work. So there's three levels, I think, of ways to approach this.
Well, Ronnie, I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this as well.
I'll just offer one, and it really goes back to this place of values and restructuring our community. And Dr. Greene and Ted knows this, and he's probably tired of it. Like I'm a preacher, and I may break into like a preaching mode, and I'm trying not to, right? But we use a lot of analogies when we're in that space, right? And one is when we go to the doctor and our body is sick, right? Something's not working right? We trust, right, if we have a good doctor, that the doctor can do the kind of, I think I have this right, diagnosis so that we have the right prognosis. I think that's the way that goes. There might be some doctors in the room, right? And so I think that's what we need. That's where we need to start, like in our neighborhoods, in our cities, in our states, in our country, right? When I was in seminary, Desmond Tutu was a professor of mine for a semester, and he talked a lot about truth and reconciliation, right? And I think in order for us to actually design the kind of economy that we're talking about, an equitable economy, an inclusive economy, which I want to come back to, that we actually have to be brave enough to really dig into, like, how did we get here? If we were running any business and the business wasn't doing what it was supposed to do, the leadership in that business would go back and do a postmortem and figure out, well, what did we do that didn't work so we don't do that again? How much harm did we create so that we can invest in a way so that we can actually make a profit, right? That's the kind of thing we need, I think, in order for us to really reset. And the COVID crisis, by the way, it is a crisis for sure, right, is really giving us really the opportunity, if we choose to step into it, to do something in America that's never been done. And a lot of folks, not just Black folks and Indigenous folks and other people of color, a lot of folks are now in pain, right? And it is a function of how, as Ted said, this system is designed. It's designed to produce the kind of pain that we're seeing. And so what would it be like if we had a national or a local right there in San Diego? Desmond Tutu called it Truth and Reconciliation. I would call it Truth and Reparation Commission, where we could actually do the kind of work where we could tell the truth about how we got here, who's lost, who's won, who've been the perpetrators, right? And how we actually repair it. And then we can take that truth, that diagnosis, and which would give us the right prognosis. And so in addition to all of the technical parts that we need to, and all the shifting of money, I think there's some truth telling we need to do about how we got here.
I think one of the challenges that this brings up for me when I think about the work we do at CPI is that often we're talking about, I hear the importance of talking about how we got here and the harm that's been done. But I also heard in what you were saying, Ronnie, is that we have to confront the harm that's still being done, right? So some of the people who are benefiting in the system, the people who are benefiting right now are benefiting often from harm. And I think that's one of the challenges as we've talked about this work of redefining what's possible for San Diegans, that there's a tendency actually that right now, to your language, and I'm a Southern girl from Kentucky growing up in Baptist churches, so I'm inclined to tell you to preach.
Okay.
Is that, for me, that it comes down to this question of, we often have the people, when we come with solutions, who say to us, you can't play blame, you can't point the finger at people who are doing things, which means you can't diagnose it. You can't diagnose the problems, in my opinion. That's one of our challenges. And that that in fact, currently the diagnosis that we're being given in our discourse is to do more harm. So we look at the industries, for instance, that we have traditionally depended on. And in San Diego, one of the things that's true about our economy is that we have been an economy based in tourism. A large part of our economy is service-based. So on the one hand, we have to think about, and I'm interested in hearing what you all think, how do we sort of build an economy that still provides those things that make San Diego beautiful and, a great place for people to come to, but how do we build that with that sense of investment in that, in wealth for everyone in this region? So that's one question I have. And then the other part of it for me is, how do we talk about the essence of how we've defined the work itself? A lot of work that exists, we talk about it as if it has to be low-wage work that is not valuable. And I'm often making the case that if we told the truth about why we feel that way, it's that we define the value of work by the people doing it. So if you see people of color doing work, it becomes devalued work. So I'm also interested in, as we build better, how do we confront that nature of racialized, gendered work that tends to erode the value of it, even as we're supposedly opening opportunity to people who've been excluded in the past? Does that bring up anything for you, Ronnie? I know we've gone to Ted each time, so I was wondering if
it does. And I don't know how to answer that question, because that you're talking about, okay, so y'all may not invite me back to this conference next year, so I'm just gonna let it go. But really what we're talking about is, how do we undo how all of us have been socialized into this idea that elite, white, hetero, patriarchal, Christian, supremacist people, right, that they are at the top of the pyramid. And the notion of the pyramid, there literally has to be kind of a reconstituting and a re-socializing of who matters and who doesn't, right? And isn't that what the Black Lives Matter movement, the movement of Black Lives, is trying to teach us, right? And it's not just about Black people, right? If you look closely, they're talking about non-gender conforming, they're talking about all kinds of folks in the Millet movement. And that's a hard nut, Dr. Greene, because our country was founded by those very men, and that font is in all of our heads. And so how we do that, I think, goes back to this truth-telling concept that I was talking about, and that's going to take a while. I don't know if the folks who are holding on to this economy in its current state will ever get into that space. And so I think while that is happening, while we're agitating for that, we also got to get moving, right? And so we're working in cities like LA, and we haven't made it to San Diego yet, but we're coming. Chicago, Charlotte, where the very people that you're talking about who've been marginalized, we're actually organizing with them. And we're talking about what is a green economy, for example? How do we actually create the kind of economy that's not just good for us, but is good for our Mother Earth, right? And what are the skills, an asset-based approach? What are the skills that are already in our community that could feed that economy? And if we don't have them, how do we get them? And then how do we organize ourselves so that when we start engaging our anchor institutions, like our city governments, like our county officials, like hospitals, like colleges and universities, we are engaging them from a place of strength, right? And so, and community building out the things that Ted talked about, cooperatives and publicly owned banks, and all the kinds of things that move the concept of ownership from the narrow slice of people who control ownership now to a broad base of owners that are in the communities who've been left out, marginalized, or who have suffered extraction in our economy.
How about you, Ted? What are you thinking?
Well, I'm tempted to just say what he said. As they say in Washington, D.C., I rise to associate myself with the comments of my learned colleague. I think he's exactly right. I mean, the Chinese have this marvelous saying that we need to learn to walk on two legs. So on one hand, we have deep, way I'd put a lot of what Ronnie said, deep ontological issues of who we are as human beings and how do we define ourselves and where do we stand and what are our, and that's a big transformational project over time. And at the same time, we need to get stuff done. People are hurting. And there are big opportunities right now, particularly at this time of so much crisis in our economy, to start to build better, to build out a new, more democratic economy. So I think we could take some real advances, even while there's very deep work that gets to the legacy of, 401 years of racialized injustice in this country. I often, when I speak, I end with a quote from Albert Einstein, the great Nobel laureate and physicist, who said, "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them." So this is a time for bold thinking. It's a time not to settle for the little incremental things we need to do. I don't think we could tinker around the margins. I also don't think there's going to be this kind of, Chinese or Soviet or Cuban revolution. We like to think of it at the Democracy Collaborative as sort of evolutionary reconstruction. Within the system we have, how do we start to build the architecture and values of the new system?
I see you're excited to make a point here. You want to jump in on?
Yeah, I also, to the point that Ted and I are making about we have a lot to do, but we need to get started. So there's an opportunity that's going to come. We missed the last one, but it's going to come again, right? And so we've seen in the crisis, this is like get started now, right? Here's what a reparative economy looked like. So we saw when COVID hit, federal government produced trillions of dollars out of nowhere. Right now, I just want to tell you, Black folks were looking at that going, well, we've been talking about reparations. Y'all said y'all didn't have the money and y'all just produced $2 trillion out. So somebody was lying, but set that aside for a second. $2 trillion, and it bailed out some of the biggest companies in the country, right? If that happens again, and it will, right? What would it look like, Dr. Greene, if any corporation that got money from the federal government, and our colleague at the Democracy Collaborative, Thomas Hanna, who's our director of research, has written extensively on this. He talks about buyouts versus bailouts. If we give any company any amount of money, which is our money, right? Guess who owns that company now? We do, right? And what would it look like if we took a portion of that company's profits as a consequence of them taking the public's money, and we flipped that money into a reparations fund for Black and Indigenous people? Like when Ted says, how do we actually build inside of the system as it exists right now? We have about a dozen different ways just like that we could start on today.
That's very exciting to me. I hope that we'll also consider that as we've been thinking about this question of how to bail out corporate landlords, how we turn that into housing that's owned by us as a community as well. Yep. So Ted, Ronnie, thank you. I appreciate all the passion and wisdom around the inclusive and equitable economy that you brought. I know we just barely touched the surface here, but we've touched on some important themes and fundamental theories that will carry through the rest of this summit. I want to speak to the attendees and say that you can look forward to exploring these themes and theories today with more practical examples and case studies from leaders in philanthropy, business, and investment. Before you get to that place, I'd like you to be prepared for our next, which is our first artistic performance of the day. It's a spoken word poem by someone who inspires me all the time, Kelsey Daniels. She's a co-organizer of March for Black Women San Diego, which is a local Black-led grassroots organization. In June 2020, the Social Equity Collaborative Fund at San Diego Grantmakers, which I'm proud to be a part of, partnered with the March for Black Women San Diego to support community-driven work to advance racial equity.
I want Black women to run this country. Then I'll be at peace. This was a comment by a white woman on a post I was tagged in days after the election, thanking me and other Black women organizers for our local leadership in making San Diego a more equitable and inclusive city for everyone. That comment and the hashtag Amen response it got from the original poster, a white man, felt coded. It felt heavy. It reminded me that inequity is not just a theoretical construct. It exists in the labor that we compliment marginalized people for without acknowledging the privilege that comes with volunteering someone to lead so you can be at peace. I've seen it in my workplace. When urged to report client stories in a way that feels exploitative of their trauma, my organization, March for Black Women San Diego, has experienced the burden of having to have external validation from orgs that are white to be seen as worthy of funding. Building better towards an equitable economy requires honesty. It means calling out the ways in which inequity has been maintained. And so in thinking through the concept of equity, which our host San Diego Grantmakers defines as intentionally addressing systemic bias that prevents people and communities from reaching their full potential, I thought sharing my internal response to that comment would be the best use of my artistic capacity. And Karen comments, I want Black women to run this country. Then I'll be at peace. And I'm reminded why I am intentionally a sanctuary for one. That my cape has been retired, that I don't owe peace, that I cannot promise myself, why I have learned to say my name with oomph, like it leaving my lips may be the last time it is drenched in knowing, and a love that holds all of me valuable. I have learned to talk my shit, like there may be a mouthful of gag on the other side in my voice, a potential pillage artifact misrepresented in perpetuity. I write fragmented notes to my phone, like Harriet taught me to dream for freedom bigger than mine, and this is my blessed endowment, a voice unsteady but full, a code that might one day find the crack it needs in the fresh eyes of someone after me. My time, don't know a world without borrowing, so I pull power from yesterday and tomorrow to make these feet a pedestal on today. I tower with intent. I eat up all the strength that has been fed to me and belch out a sincere, you tried it. I give myself permission to be mad. All honor and glory to Solange and my mama Sadie, who both knew the heaviness of expectation that was not their own making. I am Kelsey O. Daniels, the OB for Olivia, or oh, let me tell you, I am unbossed, unbought, and unimpressed by half-baked apologies written and insincere. I know that restoration doesn't have to mean forgiveness, but transformation is a currency that I do accept. I sit in the power of knowing that I do not have to celebrate with those who have resented the neck for resenting the knee that has been hovering for 400 years. I am a good thing and a good time with those who get free with me, both a rock and a space holder for hard places for those who can honor my full human. I am never not mine. The burglaries have failed, and all my enemies are tangled in booby traps with no seat at my table, but they close enough to see the shimmy. Feel the ricochet of my bountiful cackle and know that Kendrick's prophecy has come to pass because I am being all right. I am the harvest that I was promised, and the reaping shall endureth forever, but strange produce has been in this crop too. Blessed be my tears that don't come from joy. The ripped heart that got stitched but will never return to what can't exist anymore, but it still pump and work and borrow without colonizing. I get to own this moment like it is sovereign. A life I don't gotta pay rent or mortgage on, just outright mine, and I rest. Like I am giving my Nana a break vicariously, like we all get to be in peace finally, and maybe this is my privilege. To find integrity and meaning in the senseless, to still hope from the lost and found when the death has come to my neighbor's door. Maybe insanity is a lot like survival, and we do it repeatedly, hoping, wishing for results that hold grace, because that's how I was told that different gets to be born, that patience can yield a change. And isn't that this Black girl's curse? To be encyclopedia, waiting for someone who wants the memoir, to be an equity, diversity, and inclusion capstone, a gateway drug to empathy, Today, I am reclaiming what they never had the power to take away or give anyway. I exist in the legacy of women who were called to nurture before called their name. I say what they did too, just louder, with reverence and rage. I call their power unto me like I be Mammy's revenge. And this time, the bosom strikes back. Thank you.